Hello everyone, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink, and a very non-traditional Mother's Day card. However, this card could actually be like Mother's Day or Father's Day or thinking of you or anything really, but since I'm still in the middle of, making Mother's Day cards, I thought I would include this in my series. So I've started off with some light gray cardstock that is cut to 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. And I taped the raindrop stencil from the Honeybee Fall Showers stencil pack. And I taped it from behind because I wanted to use this entire piece of cardstock. And I wanted to hold the paper into place so it doesn't move when I use this stencil. And then I am using the blue Topaz Tonic Nuvo Glimmer Mist, like their glitter paste. And I wasn't sure at first if this was even going to work because the glitter, pastes like this are kind of thick, they're chunky with the glitter. And the stencil is very detailed, like there's a lot of little raindrops, but I was just experimenting. It worked perfectly. So I'm just scraping it along the stencil with my palette knife. And the thing to note with glitter paste is you want to make sure you are very diligent about cleaning off your tools and cleaning your stencil immediately afterwards. If you let it dry for even a short amount of time, it is very difficult to remove. It's like cement when it dries on the stencil. So the minute I was done, I quickly scraped off the excess back into the container, put the lid on, wiped off my palette knife immediately. I'm going to remove the stencil very, very carefully here by holding that tape. And then I take the stencil to my sink and I just clean it with some warm water and some hand soap and it's good to go. And then I always usually try to wipe up off of this is the little non-stick craft mat that comes on the glass media mat. However, if the paste dries on that, you can scrape it up with like a credit card or a gift card or even the side of the plastic palette knife. Anything comes off there pretty easily. So while this paste is still wet, I used my fingers along the sides of it just to remove the little bits that were kind of hanging off the edge. You could also let this dry and then just use your scissors to trim off the little bits if you're not planning on cutting this down at all. But either way works. It's just kind of personal preference. So I had let that dry. And then to create my scene, I used 2 shades of darker gray cardstock. And the lighter one for the raindrops was Simon's Fog cardstock. And then here I used Smoke and Slate cardstocks. And I ran them through my Gemini Junior using the Honeybee Cloud Borders dies. This entire card was inspired by the sentiment I'm going to use to create this card. But the sentiment is in the Honeybee Happiness stamp set, and it's, you make me happy when skies are gray, which is just one of my favorite little sentiments. My oldest used to sing that to me when she was 3 years old, and I have pictures of it this was back before, we took video of everything. So it is clear as day her singing that to me, and it's still one of my absolute favorites. So I was looking at that sentiment when I was flipping through my stamps the other day, and I was like, I wonder if I could create a scene kind of to embody this sentiment. So that's what I decided to do. So rather than stamp the word happy, I used the happy die cut from Honeybee, and I die cut that 3 times from some yellow cardstock. And I'm using the Gina Connect glue to adhere them. I think this was my first time using this adhesive. You want to make sure you're not squeezing the bottle. It comes out very easily. It's not liquidy in the sense of it being very watery, but it comes out of the bottle really easily. You don't squeeze it because otherwise you're gonna get a big blob of glue. So I stacked all 3 of those sentiments together, and then for my cloud background, I had measured everything before I die cut it. So the cardstock was already cut to 4 1/4 inches wide. And then I'd staggered the dies on purpose to make this easier to layer these all together because I wanted it to go, dark, light, dark, light. So I did that, and then I adhered all those together with my little Xyron tape runner. So then I've got these nice dark gray clouds, and then this blue glittery rain, and then I'm going to have this bright sentiment, that's going to really stand out. So for my cloud pieces, to adhere them, the easiest thing to do is to use some foam tape, because adhering over top of anything you've used a glitter paste on, or any embossing paste really, you want to be aware of what adhesive you're using so that it really sticks and doesn't, fall off. So I chose foam tape because that's the easiest and it really sticks down. And I chose the Simon Says Stamp, the Big Mama foam tape roll, because this tape is a little bit thinner, actually a lot bit thinner. It's about half as thick as the Scotch 3M foam tape. So I like that it gives a little bit of dimension without being extremely thick and bulky. So I applied that to the complete entire back of this piece of cloud die cuts, and then I'm going to peel off all that backing paper, and then I can line this up onto my background that has completely dried at this point. So then I have my clouds and my rain and the glitter, and then my big die cut happy word that I purposely did in yellow because I really wanted it to just pop. So I also ended up die cutting one of the outlines with vellum. There's two outlines that come in that die set. There's this one, and then there's a bigger one that has a bigger outline with little piercing holes all the way around it, just for extra something. But I chose just the one outline, so I'm going to adhere my stack of die cuts to that vellum just to help it stand out even just a little bit more. And again, use the same Connect glue there, but just very light amounts of it because I don't want this oozing out. I don't want this showing on the vellum at all. So after I've got that all adhered into place, I am going to stamp and emboss my sentiments from the Happiness stamp set. So I have a piece of black cardstock here that I'm going to use my anti-static powder tool on. And that just keeps the embossing powder from clinging to, you know, anywhere where I don't want it to be. And then I have both of my stamps from the Happiness set onto their blocks, and I'm going to ink those up with the Ink on 3 Juicy Embossing ink, making sure to tap very lightly in this. Like I've said in previous videos, they titled or named this ink proper. It is juicy, so very light taps with your stamps when using this ink. So I stamped the sentiments with that, and then I coated it with some white embossing powder. I made sure to stamp both of those stamps kind of on the same line there on the bottom of the cardstock so I can trim this out in one pass. It just saves me time and effort. I'm all about that. So got it coated with a white embossing powder, and then I'm going to melt this with my heat tool. I'm going to, after it's had a few seconds to cool off, after they're all melted, I just use my hands to kind of rub against the cardstock to remove that anti-static powder. Usually I use a Swiffer cloth. When I made this, I had just finished tossing my Swiffer cloth because it was full of, you know, glitter and embossing powder and everything else. And I was too lazy to get up and get another one. So I just use my fingers to remove that anti-static powder. And then I'm just going to use my little guillotine trimmer here to trim down these sentiments so that they're in individual little strips. And when it's smaller pieces like this, I have to make a note of using the bottom of the trimmer for this. It keeps the pieces from shifting as the cutter is coming down so that I don't end up with crooked cuts. So to adhere those sentiments to my card front, I just use little strips of Darice, the little Darice foam strips that I love that are nice and narrow. And I adhered the first part of the sentiment, and then the die cut sentiment here, again, Gina Connect glue, making sure to apply it just behind the cardstock. I don't want that oozing out. I don't want to see it through the vellum. So very little tiny dots of that. And then I can press that into place. And then for the second or the final part of this sentiment, I end up actually removing a little bit of that foam tape just so I can kind of tuck it up above the bottom of that Y there. I just thought it looked better there. So I was able to kind of wiggle off that foam tape. It wasn't like fully adhered quite yet because I hadn't really pressed it down. So I was able to kind of remove it there and create that little bit of a opening so it's not all lumpy and bumpy and all that stuff. So remove that little bit so I can stick that into place. And then while I was making this card, I didn't want it to just be, you know, a gray, miserable, rainy card. Like, it had to get happy, obviously. So to finish the inside of the card, I pulled out the Sunburst A2 cover plate die from Honeybee, and I die cut some light blue cardstock with that. And then I'm going to adhere that to the inside of my card. So I'm just using that Connect glue and just putting thin little amounts on the wider areas. And then I'd use the Sunburst cover plate and die cut the same yellow cardstock that I used for the happy word on the front. So I die cut that as well. And now I can inlay all those pieces into this blue die cut on the inside of my card. So basically you're going to go from, you know, gray, cloudy skies, and then you're going to open the card to sunshine. I just thought that was like, I was so proud of myself when I was making this. It was like so much fun sometimes when, you know, these ideas just start rolling and things just take on a life of their own. So very easy to quickly inlay all of these pieces just using the Connect adhesive, and I would just scribble it lightly onto each area and then just grab all of the coordinating pieces and press them into place. So this didn't take really like any time at all to complete. And then my original plan was to just stamp the coordinating sentiment that I wanted on the inside with black ink, but rather than do that, I thought it would be cute to add one last cloud. So I die cut that dark gray, that slate cardstock, with one of the cloud borders dies, and then I used my anti-static powder tool again. And then I created my own sentiment using a bunch of the words and whatnot from the Happiness stamp set. And one of the stamps in there, it says Go Lucky, because you could have Happy Go Lucky as your sentiment. I didn't want the word go, so I just trimmed that off. I can use that at a separate time. It doesn't hurt your stamps. I know some people, it freaks them out when I cut my stamps apart, but it made this a lot easier. So by removing that, I was able to spell out, I am so incredibly lucky to have you. So you could have you as my mom, to have you as my dad, to have you as my partner, my husband. You know, you could make this card for anything, really, which is kind of the whole point. So I lined all those stamps up so I can stamp them all in one pass, making my life easier. And I'm going to ink those up again with that juicy embossing ink, and then stamp that onto that piece of die cut cardstock with the juicy ink. And then I'm going to heat emboss that with that same white embossing powder. That's going to kind of tie the whole thing together. So got the outside of the card with the clouds and the rain, and then you open up the inside and you can see the clouds are starting to part and the sun's coming out. So I love how this turned out. It was so much fun to make this entire scene from stencils and glitter paste and cardstock and die cutting. I really enjoyed making this card, and I love the colors and the whole theme of it and just everything. So I've got my entire inside finished. I'm going to adhere this card front panel to the outside of the card. And this, like I said, it was sized to cover the entire card front. So it's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And once I've got that adhered into place, that finishes off my card. So as always, I'll have links below the video to my blog post with links to all of the supplies used. You can check that out in the description box below the video as well as on my blog. Thank you all so much for watching and subscribing and thumbs upping and commenting on my videos. I really appreciate it, and I will see you all very soon in the next one. Bye!